My game, my rules.
Necromunda Underhive Wars is a 2020 video game made by devs who didn't really understand why their previous game worked. The result was Underhive Wars, a game that strayed too far from the tabletop Astronomicon, and got subsequently scrambled in the warp. It's a Warhammer 40k game set in the sprawling hive city of Necromunda Primus, based on the classic Necromunda skirmish game. It's Warhammer, but smaller, and also less expensive. You don't control an army in these skirmish games, but instead a small band of gangers duking it out in the Underhive for riches and plunder. It serves as kind of the sequel to Mordheim, City of the Damned, a video game version of the Warhammer fantasy skirmish game, Mordheim. In my coverage of Mordheim earlier this year, we discovered it to be a very strange experience. It's miserable. Poorly made in so many ways. Glitches, bad AI, punishing and opaque design choices, and despite it all, Mordheim is absolutely delightful. One of the most entertaining games I've covered on this channel. Like a Mad Max car assembled from recycled garbage yet running like a dream. It's trash to be sure, but it's our trash. In the months since, I've ruminated on it further and had the chance to trade opinions with the Mordheim community in the comments section. And what I'm left with is a much more clear understanding of why Mordheim worked and why Necromunda does not. Mordheim City of the Damned is the result of a somewhat incompetent video game company adapting a really good tabletop game to PC. The result of it was that the components that the video game company was responsible for was mostly garbage. But the tabletop DNA of Mordheim they were drawing from was what kept it all together. Necromunda Underhive Wars was made several years later. The devs sort of just took the Mordheim formula and applied it to Necromunda, which meant that they were actually drawing a lot more from their past video game than they were from the tabletop game of Necromunda. That's right, they ported over all the stuff that they were responsible for, the bad stuff. Underhive Wars was a video game that had all of the messy incompetence of Mordheim without the authentic tabletop spine holding the rotted structure up. Now, to be clear, I don't want to throw the entire studio under the bus. There were actually a lot of strengths in both of these games. 3D modeling, art direction, sound design, the writing, the ability to project atmosphere. When I call out the developers in this case, I'm primarily talking about the game designers and the leadership. The game is just designed horribly in every conceivable way. Also, the bugs are just beyond anything tolerable, especially in Necromunda. Now, there could be a lot of reasons why, so I don't want to pin it on any one team. It could be bad programmers, could be the testers not doing their job, or it could just be the leadership not allowing those teams the time, resources, and space to do their jobs. Although it's tough to know exactly who, some of the important movers and shakers leading this studio and designing the gameplay have absolutely no understanding of the principles they're working with. It is frankly a sobering lesson on overconfidence, developing games without having your skill fundamentals down. Skills like those you could learn from today's sponsor, Boot.dev. Boot.dev is a frighteningly ingenious course for learning back-end web coding from beginning to end, without ever getting bored in the process. Programmers working back-end make a median salary in the US of $100,000 a year. Oh, but to get there, what a pain. Thousands of dollars spent at a university, 4 years of your life, homework, boring, long nights. There's a better way, and it's Boot.dev. They've custom-built a web course specialized in getting you set up for the workforce. And better than that, they've gamified it. They've made it fun. Gain XP, collect items, do quests, take part in bi-monthly boss raids. It's everything addictive about video games, but turned towards teaching you a skill that can elevate your life without you getting bored, frustrated, or quitting. And don't let the fun side of this fool you. This is serious in-depth code school. You're going to learn both the theory and the practice. And with a 30-day no questions asked refund, the risks are basically zero, and the potential rewards are, well, not to be blunt, but the potential rewards are $100,000 a year. I've already been loving the early courses, and I'm going to be whiling away in the code mines all winter. Go to boot.dev and use my code, WilliamSRD, to get 25% off your first payment. So obviously that is going to mean you're going to get the most bang out of your buck if you buy the yearly plan. A big thanks to boot.dev for sponsoring the video. Now, let's get to Necromunda. Before we talk about the gameplay, I want to talk about Necromunda itself. It's a piece of the 40k setting that a lot of people learned the basics of early on in their time with 40k, and then never bother trying to understand it in its entirety. It's a massive city of billions in a metal termite mound. There are big clan houses and they fight grimdark sci-fi wars in the Underhive so that they can gather scrap technology. Simple, right? Easy to comprehend, understandable in pretty much just 2 sentences. And that's fundamentally all you really need to know about Warhammer's most iconic hive world. From there, kind of instinctually, most people who want to know more about Necromunda will start to look deeper into the various clans that you can play as, learning the ins and outs of the corrupted tech of the Vansar, or the profane alchemies of House Escher. The clans are all cool, don't get me wrong, and the lore contained within them is fascinating. But to me, it's actually hard to even notice them past the megalith that is Necromunda itself. The visceral horror of a world holding lives that may be in the trillions. A world of massive Underhive Wars for dominance. A world stripped of its rocky flesh to turn the whole of it into one ever-sinking, ever-shifting manufactorium. It looks disorderly. It looks like it's precarious to the extreme. The whole thing just one bad day from collapse, either into political anarchy or literally collapsing under the weight of the largest structures built in all of human history. A planet of a billion gangs, a planet of sinking metal, built atop the spires of the old, a race to defy gravity. Necromunda looks like chaos. But the thing that makes it so fascinating, the thing that makes it so terrifying, is that it isn't. Not remotely. Necromunda is stable beyond imagination. It has lasted like this in a brutal harmony for thousands of years, and it will do so for thousands more. Its perfect stability shall hold until the last resource has been stripped. Only when the final metal plate has been cannibalized from the last ruined shack, reforged into a last gun, thrust into the hands of the last Necromundan, shipped off to war, shall the perfect tyranny finally be allowed to end. It is a world of foul harmony, a place of violent and unjust perfection, all of it existing to serve the whims of the ruling dynasty. House Helmar. Let's start broad, as far from the Underhive as we can, and let's work our way down there. The Imperium of Man is a vast interstellar empire. Its worlds are many, and they fall into several classifications. Necromunda is a hive world, a planet meant to produce 2 things: low-quality industrial goods, and untold numbers of humans to serve in the Imperium's endless wars. Necromunda performs both duties with an efficiency that puts the rest of the Imperium to shame. The books all make it clear that Necromunda is productive like few other worlds are capable of. And it doesn't produce goods through the inefficient weight of numbers. This is a planetary manufactorum that runs well, with Hive Primus alone having more wealth and productivity than most other planets of the Imperium. And as for the population, well, it's doubtful that more than a handful of planets in the Imperium house more souls for the Imperial war machine. 4,000 years back, a census was attempted, but the effort failed spectacularly, with the Administratum only succeeding in counting the upper level of the spire nobility of Hive Primus. These rare upper crust types, these top 0.01% ultra-wealthy aristocrats, counted out at around 1 billion. The population below is beyond count, in the dozens or hundreds of billions. And that's just one hive. And Necromunda has many. Necromunda is a wild success by every conceivable metric as far as the Imperium is concerned. And it shall remain as such until it has finished the process of recycling itself into industrial goods to be shipped across the stars. And how have they done it? How has the Helmar dynasty created one of the only planets in the Imperium to truly use every last resource available on an entire planet for the prosperity of the greater galaxy? It starts on the surface. Settlements cannot sprawl, not here. This was a resource-rich world, and every last scrap was to be plundered. Populations were herded into the hives, narrow but tall and cut deep into the earth like termite mounds. Thus, the rest of the surface could be strip-mined. Little lives anymore on the surface, leaving House Orlok and their cadet clans to disassemble the world with the passing centuries, interrupted only by the occasional mutant raid. 15,000 years of relentless digging has ensured that few natural resources can be found in the continent-spanning mining scars any longer. The mineral wealth is now found in digging for ruins, disassembling mining rigs and scaffolds, and sorting through the trash heaps of the planet, things left behind when the world was young and wasteful. The resources pulled from the surface are sold to the hives, and it would be easiest to explain them from the top down. Hive Primus, the capital of Necromunda, is what we think about when we talk about the planet Necromunda. At its very apex, so high up that the clouds seem distantly small beneath him, sits the Lord Helmar. The Helmars made Necromunda what it is, having reunified the planet from the ashes left behind from the Horus Heresy. Like the planet itself, they have themselves been remade to fit the purpose placed upon them. They were born from House Helmar, and when the Lord Helmar found his own children diseased and sickly, he bioengineered the Helmars from his own DNA, mixed with the greatest gene traits found on Necromunda. The Helmars were literally born to be the perfect tyrants. Children are pitted against one another so that only the most formidable may sit the throne. Below them are the great houses of the spires. They scheme and they plot and they try to take power where they can, but it's ultimately ineffectual. Helmar rule is kept safe through extreme social rigidity. Even the nobles have little hope of advancing beyond their station, and those that do will find their little games easily squashed when House Helmar withdraws their favor, leaving the other great houses to swoop in and carve up their holdings. Some fluidity is there out of necessity, lest the spire be frozen completely and unable to adapt, but it's all perfectly under control of the Lord Governor. The nobles can play their little games, but they will die at the station they were born into, lest they draw the wrath of the ruling dynasty. But what privileges it is to be born at those stations! The Spire nobility have the exclusive privilege to be the middlemen of interplanetary shipping. They buy raw goods from the Imperium and sell them to the great manufacturing houses below. Likewise, they buy the finished products of an entire world and sell them at a premium to the starships that flit between worlds, growing ever more wealthy and ever more decadent off the profits by the year. And now we go down Hive. Let's cut through the terminology. The clan houses of this world are not explained by calling them houses or clans or families. They are all of those things, to be sure, but they're also so much more besides. Cawdor, Dilak, Escher, Goliath, Vansar, and Orlok, with many minor houses besides. These houses are more like nation-states. The clans are talked about like families, but they're honestly much more like ethnicities. A member of House Orlok doesn't live across the street from a Goliath or go next door to borrow a cup of starch from their House Escher neighbor. That's simply not how Necromunda is built. Such a structure as Necromunda Primus cannot be planned, could not have been. The original foundations have sunk deep into the planet, pressed farther and farther downward into the crust of the world. The spires built atop it were massive, but even they could not absorb the incredible weight of a steel world built atop them. They crushed, compacted, and sank, and were swallowed whole by the hungry earth. And then, the spires built upon those ones sank as well, and the next ones too. Necromunda is sinking under its own weight, as though the world they stripped of resources is hungry to swallow them back. There is no plan in place that the Helmars have set to keep the spires stable and growing upwards with time. Instead, that duty is left to the clans and the noble families. They build self-contained chambers, knowing that if it's to be worth the expense to build a hold for such plentiful billions, that it must be strong enough to hold up against whatever gets built atop it. These many chambers of the hive make a cross-section of the arcology look like a honeycomb. The clan houses each control their little domed chambers isolated from the others, each one a secluded totalitarian state, populated by their clan and working their factories. Entrances between are few. Not many goods travel across the hive to different houses, though some trade does occur, such as scrap metal purchased from House Orlok, or alchemies acquired from House Escher, or even processed steel from the Goliaths to be turned into more advanced goods. But the majority of goods, however, only travel up-hive or down-hive, imported or exported off-world. Members of the clans do not meet in day-to-day life. They are nations with borders and self-contained economies, with their members being accounted for and protected by the house. Like the upper spires, the guilds in the many-pocketed chambers of Necromunda have little social mobility. You will maintain your place. Things must stay stable, lest the whole social structure collapse. To rule over billions in competition with the other houses and on behalf of the vast dynasties above you, the houses must maintain their rigidity. Wars between clans are forbidden by treaty imposed by the Helmar dynasty. There is no place for uncertainty in a vast networked machine as large as this one. There was a 7th house of Necromunda once, a house that fell into decline. The Lord Helmar personally stepped in and divided it up among the other 6 to maintain the balance. Clans will grow and shrink in Necromunda, but the powers that be will always pick sides to maintain a status quo. But this state of being could not hold with efficiency, not without decadence and waste creeping in. Meritocracy is required, even if the instability it brings must be strictly disallowed. It is well that there is an Underhive, for it too is an important piece of the puzzle. The Underhive is what's left when a dome sinks below the planet's surface and becomes no longer profitable for the houses as the damage mounts and the chambers compress under the weight of a metal mountain. In the higher parts, it is merely abandoned, no longer profitable to maintain, but the lower you go, the more compacted it becomes. Chambers crushed together until it forms a solid foundation of steel and toxic waste. There is a point down below where no human lives. It's too poisonous and too cramped. Only the most hideous of mutants live below the Underhive, things that should not have ever been human, but somehow were. The Underhive is a frontier where the houses do not rule, a place where law does not hold. There are settlements down here, places where outcasts and the impoverished flee to escape the rigid hierarchy above. Peace is maintained in these settlements by the guilders, representatives of the shipping guilds who buy scrap, salvage, and any number of rare goods from the toxic wastes down below. Beyond the settled walls are only hideous and violent mutants, and the gangs who plumb the depths. Like with the clan houses, which are better thought of as nations, it is important to put out of mind the concept of a gang as we think of it in our world. That makes it sound like what they're doing here is unlawful or in some way unwelcome by the powers above. Certainly, much of what goes on in the Underhive breaks Imperial law. But every last little thing done in the dark-feeted depths of the Lost Caverns is exactly what Lord Helmar and the clan houses want. Indeed, Both the Palatine Enforcers and the Planetary Defense Forces are quick to step in should the state of the Underhive drift from the role it was intended for. The clans must be allowed to war, meritocracy must be allowed to thrive, and the people must be allowed to dream of a better life, lest they turn to more heretical solutions to their misery. The Underhive is not in chaos, not at all. It's simply the release valve of the entire hive's suffering. Many youth of the clans, discontent with a life at the bottom of the hierarchy, will travel down hive to serve in the gangs. Should they earn a name for themselves, they might be hired back on in a better place than where they started. Or they might make valued friends and contacts down here to help grease the wheels when the time comes to return to the clan. If nothing else, assuming they survive their adventures, they might earn some wealth to improve their living conditions in the lowest rung of hive society. Necromunda is in truth a place of great social mobility. They just keep it isolated from the factories. You'll never be promoted from within the clan, but if you buy a gun and set the Underhive ablaze, you can be rehired by the clan into a much higher position than what you started at. But these gangs do much more than simply being the stand-in for meritocracy. They're also the militant wings of the clan houses. An Underhive war isn't real. They're just clan wars, fought by proxy in the depths. Gangs are on occasion even brought into the hive proper for small operations or assassinations, but this can't be abused without the Palatine Enforcers becoming involved. And this state of constant underground warfare does more than benefit the clans and keep the peace. Might I remind you, hive worlds produce two things: manufactured goods and soldiers. It wouldn't be enough for the world to just produce people. It must produce tough, hardened soldiers to fight intergalactic wars. Regiments for the Imperial Guard are not often recruited directly from the clans, but rather from the gangs. The most famous of which is the Necromunda 8th, recruited from a powerful gang called the Spiders. The 8th is technically a planetary defense force, but was in practice the attack dogs of Lord Helmar himself. They would frequently be sent on Underhive raids to maintain order, or even be quietly sent as mercenaries off-world to fight in Imperial campaigns, when Lord Helmar deemed it necessary or profitable to do so. The Underhive and its gangs more than justify themselves based on their social usefulness alone. But that's not even accounting for the vast wealth of the Underhive. It's all valuable, every last piece. The metal can be recycled, many machines still work and be reclaimed and reused. A ganger can build a proper nest egg for when they return to their clan, even before they go hunting for more valuable artifacts in the bad zones. It's little wonder that the gangs constantly war for territory. The very floor beneath them can be carved up with lass cutters and sold for a dishonest paycheck. Necromunda is old. Hive Primus is old. It was here before the Great Crusade, and it was once the capital of an interplanetary empire. The deeper you go, the older the technology you find. Archaeotech, objects of near magical power compared to the standard machines of the Imperium. But there's more. Condensation from above carries microparticles of steel and iron, creating stalactites and stalagmites of pure, high-grade metal. Toxic runoff solidifies and crystallizes with the passage of centuries, forming powerful compounds that can be salvaged for any number of uses. Plus, the ecosystem of mold, fungus, and mutant creatures all can be harvested and sold for food or medicine. All of this is here in the Underhive, just waiting for an ambitious ganger to take it. Necromunda gangs are more like adventuring parties than real-world gangs. They're down here to map the tunnels, salvage anything they can grab, battle it out with their rivals as well as monsters and mutants, and dive deep into ruins full of ancient secrets and artifacts. And all before retiring with their riches to a nice role as a middle manager, or even a foreman at a steel mill in the Hive proper. So I hope going forward into the video game, I hope I've made it clear that Necromunda is more than a big tower full of gangs. I hope you know that when you fight an Underhive War, winning battles for wealth and a better life, you're following the exact script that the Lord Helmar wrote for you. This whole world runs in perfect order for the benefit of his dynasty and for the wider Imperium. It will hold in this pattern until the last bolt is salvaged and the last Necromundan is shipped off to die for his emperor. Necromunda might be the most terrifying place in the Imperium from my perspective. Because when I look at a civilization like this, its brutal harmony, its misery and decay, its false promises and murderous hierarchies, I can't help but think, this would work. A society like this could maintain its evil forever, and the trapped masses of humanity within would never escape, or even know what escape actually looks like. And that frightens me, with all that it might say about our own society. Necromunda has existed in varying forms and editions ever since the first printing. Although its sister product, Mordheim, is long dead, Necromunda has been going strong. There are countless books in the modern 3rd edition that expand the gangs, the lore, and your toolset. The models are high quality, the community is alive and well. There's also been a staggering number of novels set in this setting, as well as audio dramas, comic books, and, of course, 2 video games. It's a thriving subsetting of Warhammer 40,000. And if this video has gotten you interested in the setting, I'm forewarning you that Underhive Wars is not a great way to get into Necromunda. Instead, I'd recommend hopping into the tabletop, or even picking up one of the novels. Notably, one of these novels, Survival Instinct from 2005, was authored by Andy Chambers, who wrote the plot for the video game we are about to cover. And listen, the video game has a ton of problems, but the story written by Andy is not one of them. If you're enjoying this video so far, please like the video, and consider subscribing to the channel. I'm William SRD. I cover the video games related to tabletop franchises. I try to tell you about the original IP, and then we cover the video game with all the tabletop context we need. I've got a monthly podcast available through my Patreon, where my co-host and I bring on friends to discuss both tabletop RPGs and video games. A link is down below if you'd like to support the channel and become a true SRD bag. Necromunda Underhive Wars is a game split into 2 incomplete halves. There is a sort of real campaign in the style of how the tabletop campaigns work. You compete with other gangs for resources to buy gear, level up your units, and try to adapt to the consequences as your characters get injured or even die in battle. This mode is where the real meat of the gameplay is. The squad management, the careful prioritization of what's important in the mission, the rewards for victory. If you watch my Mordheim video, then this game mode will likely feel very familiar. It's straight up just lifted from the tabletop. This is how they run the campaigns, and it feels mechanically like the way that this game is meant to be played. And then on the other hand, there is the story mode. The story mode is a preset campaign where you do 15 missions in the Underhive and follow along with the story. It hops POVs between gangs a lot, so you won't have access to your gang management or unit progression or even any form of rewards for your mission successes. It's just the missions with preset, pre-made gangs that the devs put together for you. These 2 game modes exist in an extremely unhappy medium. In Mordheim, every faction had a campaign story that you were attempting to progress through. It was bare bones, but you had goals, you had story, it kept you going. In Necromunda, however, the story has been completely ripped out of the main campaign and put into the story mode instead. What's left is a story mode that's missing the most rewarding half of the gameplay, and then, when you're done, you can keep playing in this bonus mode if you're not bored yet. Neither mode feels like it has what it actually needs to thrive. While the campaign structure has indeed improved from Mordheim, they ripped out your goals and your reason to care, unless you're one of the most gameplay-focused of players. Meanwhile, the story is also much improved from Mordheim, but you're going to feel like you're playing through a really small, unrewarding game while you go through that story. And this game is structured such that the story mode isn't an optional thing. The tutorial is the story mode. So for the majority of new players who didn't play Mordheim first, they'll play the 15-mission story campaign and then move on with their lives without ever touching Necromunda's real gameplay mode. And that's if they even finish. Steam achievements suggest that only 10% of players have finished the story campaign. It was a misguided and, frankly, arrogant decision by the devs to demote the tabletop campaign that made their first game worth playing, in favor of making their worst game mode the star of the show. This alone is like 50% of what's wrong with Necromunda Underhive Wars. They ruined the structure of the game by noodling in the formula without understanding that formula. As to the rest of what's wrong, well, you'll see when we start talking about the actual granularities of the gameplay. For now, let's get into story mode. And although I'm going to continue complaining just relentlessly about how this game plays, I have little bad to say about the actual story it's telling. We start with a pair of gangers from Clan Escher. The Eschers are the alchemists and chemical engineers of Necromunda. Apparently, exposure to toxic materials have permanently fucked up their chromosomes. The result is that the Y chromosome specifically is completely ruined. Escher males are basically shriveled little wretches who can't leave their clan holdings. The result is a matriarchal clan that tends to think that the men of other clans, especially Goliaths, are, spiritually the same shriveled wretches as Escher males. Our Escher gals are part of the Bane Cats gang, led by Tessera. Tessera has been leading her gang down Hive, against the bidding of the Escher matriarchs. The two gangers in Mission 1 kill a pair of deserting Bane Cats who want to abandon Tessera's drive downwards. Tess herself soon explains what exactly they're doing down here.
Whatever it is, it's making its own power now. And that means only one thing. Archaeotech. No one knows about this yet, and we're out here to keep it that way.
We do a pair of missions as the Bane Cats make their way down farther, getting ambushed by Goliaths and Orlocks. A deal is struck with a merchant guilder named Devos. He wants Tessera to cut him into the Archaeotech Hall, and also find him a home base. In exchange, he'll give her a map to where the lost technology is, as well as warning her about the powerful dog soldiers gang that rules the area. Devos is going to be an important character throughout all this, and probably my favorite character in the story.
Alright, you blood-sucking Gilder. You've got a deal.
It's pretty obvious after only 3 short missions that the voice acting in this game varies wildly in quality.
So, you have a route to get us below, Gilder Devos.
I do. I can direct you to an area of Underhive you've specified. Lawless place, it must be said.
There's some really great performances here, but there's also some that just make you wince when you hear them. Forcing Americans to do British accents doesn't always work.
Big enough that Tess is more worried about those matriarchs hearing about it.
Beyond that, the sound work is mostly competent. The sound effects aren't ever going to get you excited in Underhive Wars, but the music on the other hand is there when you need it to be. I especially like the little music stinger that plays when a character gets knocked out. On the other hand, a great deal of the music tracks just kinda sound like filler. But overall, when major gameplay things happen, or whenever there's a story beat, the music really shows up where it counts.
Hell with that.
It combines really well with the cutscenes, which there are a lot of. At both the beginning and end of every mission, there is a full cutscene to watch. That's 30 if you're counting. And these cutscenes are actually really well done. It's stylish animation, it's got a good flow, and it gets you pumped for what you're up to. Despite being an overall downgrade from Mordheim, Necromunda managed to retain and in fact improve upon its predecessor's biggest strength: an incredible ability to set the mood. After Tess and DeVos make their plan, we hop POVs. A Goliath from the Rowdy Boys, the gang we just beat up in the last mission, gets wind of Tessera's plan and reports it to his boss, Bloodfor. We take control of Bloodfor's gang and start following Tessera's trail to try and get to the Archaeotech first. To that end, we attack the base Tessera set up for DeVos.
Let me out!
Apparently, after getting what she wanted from him, Tess literally just shoved Gilder DeVos into a locked room and left him to rot. The Rowdy Boys save him, and he gives us the location to the tech. The same deal is given: a map in exchange for a cut. Tess has just made a powerful enemy in the Rowdy Boys, and this is kind of a fun part of her character. She's clearly the most competent of the gang leaders in the story, but her downside is that she compulsively makes enemies. If she ever slows down or slips up, she'll be buried alive. Meanwhile, DeVos curls his mustache. Whether it's the Bane Cats or the Rowdy Boys, he intends to take his cut either way. All part of the plan. The boys fight their way onto a train, and then we hop POVs once again. The Rowdy Boys and DeVos aren't the only ones mad at Tessera. The Black Ash and Orlok clan is also furious at her for what she did in the second mission. The leader, Flint, approaches DeVos to ask where she is so that he can take revenge.
Oh, no. I could never tell you where to find Tessera if you mean to rob her. Whoever wins my supremacy contest will be going to help Tessera.
Well, we'll help her alright, won't we, boys?
The Black Ash sarcastically decide to go along with it, while DeVos chuckles again about how good the plan is. After the mission, Flint's gang helps DeVos capture some loot. Then they steal it from him and run off to kill Tessera.
My plan from the outset, of course.
We're now half done the campaign, so this is a good opportunity to talk about the gameplay within. It's rough, you guys. It is not good. Now, I've hammered down already on the fact that the tabletop was the crutch that kept Mordheim standing. And when I say that, I'm largely talking about design philosophies, not so much the direct mechanics. Mordheim's combat and stats were very different from the skirmish game rules, and that was plenty fine. Likewise, that's also true of Necromunda. Combat is its own thing where you have action points, movement points, and a ton of different abilities and combos that you pay for with those points every turn. Overall, it works, and it works well. It's actually quite fun to control your squad in Necromunda, especially in the regular campaign. It's kind of a strange feeling. I'm left wanting to play as my gang. I just wish the game surrounding my gang was better. But no, when I say the game strayed too far from the tabletop, I mean the design choices. Big changes were made to the formula without understanding the implications of what they were messing with. The biggest one and the most destructive is the changes they made to the battle map. In Mordheim, the maps were pretty similar to the tabletop, but scaled up a bit and made wider. Movement speeds were still low, and it took a while to cross the map. It was literally as though you were just playing on wargaming terrain, but with a lot more buildings. Necromunda instead decided to reinvent this completely. It's worth noting that Necromunda in its tabletop version is about a vertical hive city. Its maps are just innately taller than a lot of other tabletop games. But Underhive Wars took that philosophy and scaled it up times 1,000. You're now fighting in vast chasms, trenches with incredible catwalks, many floors and levels of terrain, and just massive distances between all these things. And when you make the maps that big, the old Mordheim walking speeds are just not gonna cut it, right? So they pretty much tripled or even quadrupled how fast you can go. They also made it real easy to move up and down floors. You've got elevators that can go up and down 4 times a turn, grappling hooks to let you rappel down any height, zip lines that take you across the map for a crazy cheap action point cost. You are so incredibly mobile in Underhive Wars. And it makes sense that they would make these changes when they scaled up the maps. Conceptually, it's really cool. The maps are these huge industrial zones, and they have a great sense of place to them. It's also a neat fantasy to be these psycho gangers zipping around like mad. I can see why the team thought this would be a fun change. But altering the game like this, straying so far from the original design, it had consequences that more or less tore this game to pieces. Consequences that the devs did not think about. Necromunda is supposed to be a game of positioning, a game where cover matters, angles matter, elevation matters, holding zones and territory, it all matters. But when every last game piece can break the sound barrier, every last one of those mechanics begins to break down. I mean, for one thing, forget about cover. There's just nowhere you can hide that an enemy ganger won't be able to sprint around to get a clear shot at. Holding territory and choke points? Not happening. Enemies can pretty easily go the long way and not waste any time doing so. Movements up and down are also so incredibly unpredictable. Underhive Wars is a game where positioning no longer matters, because every piece can basically be anywhere on the map in a single turn. This fundamentally alters what style of game you're playing. It's not a tactics game anymore. It's a game of action economy, akin to Dungeons & Dragons combat. You can't stand anywhere that's safe, and it's trivial to line up shots on your enemies like 90% of the time. Combat instead becomes a game of rattling off as many attack actions as you can and taking out enemy pieces so that you can snowball. And that's not unpleasant as a change. I enjoy combat with this philosophy every now and then. It's fun to cleverly combo out and get like 3 attacks out of your sniper in one turn, piling them all into an exposed enemy and shifting the action economy in your favor. The consequences to this on the player side, on your side, are fine. You're going to start to understand what kind of game you're playing and you adjust. But the developers, the devs didn't understand the consequences of what they had just done to their game. And so they designed the AI to be playing a game that does not, in practice, exist. The AI has no comprehension of action economy. They still think it's a game of positioning and maneuver. They aim for one perfect attack per turn, declining the chance to smack you for 40 damage with their chainsword, to instead do a stunning array of maneuvers, go up 3 floors, and spend every last move point they have to do a death from above attack that deals 60 damage to you instead. Tactical brilliance, right? Except then you counter by attacking them back for the same 40 damage, use entrenchment to trade away most of your movement for the turn in exchange for more action points, and then you attack again for a second 40 damage. The AI is trying to play the wrong game. You need to get the most attacks, not the best attacks, not the most clever attacks, and not the attacks that put you at the least risk. Sometimes it's even simpler. They spend all their movement points getting into cover after they attack, instead of using entrenchment and just attacking a second time. That cover doesn't do anything for you, buddy. I can go around it so easy. The AI is therefore extremely bad at the strategy of this game, because the devs didn't realize that scaling up the maps and increasing the movement speed would fundamentally change the type of game they had made. And that, I'm afraid, is only one half of the sins of the AI. Listen, the AI in Mordheim wasn't great. In fact, it's probably still the same AI as Necromunda with some tweaks. But maps and objectives were a lot less complicated in that game. The AI is not remotely equipped for the task in front of them. They get stuck on objects constantly, they waste all their action points going up and down floors for no particular reason, and they prioritize the strangest things, constantly failing to drop a killing blow on my units so that they can instead go 3 floors up, cross a bridge, and give their friend a 15% extra movement speed buff. Lots of games have bad AI, but it's not super noticeable. It's like having a friend who didn't do their homework. Doesn't really affect you. If the units in a first-person shooter aren't sure where to walk to find you, it's fine. You only see them when they have found a way to shoot you. But Necromunda Underhive Wars is a turn-based game where you spend half or more of your playtime just watching the AI play the game. Now it's like your buddy didn't do his homework, and he has to present it in front of the class. I played Underhive Wars and I just felt this overwhelming sense of second-hand embarrassment. All of the developer mistakes are just in plain sight, forcing you to stare at it as the AI fucks up over and over and over. And eventually, I stopped feeling second-hand embarrassment. Turns in Necromunda take a long time, and the AI wastes a lot of that time badly with its nonsense antics. I started to feel outright disrespected instead. Let's return to the story. Tessera's antics, pushing ever closer to the Archaeotech, has put this sector of the Underhive into an uproar. Rival gangs, united only by being local and hating the Bane Cats, band together, uniting under the Grand Dog. It's now 3 gangs against 1. Tess bullishly pushes forward. It should have been her death, outgunned by a horde. Fortunately for her, the Black Ash and the Rowdy Boys arrive. Where hate united the local gangs, greed unites the 3 invading gangs. Tess refuses to play nice with the boys, but her pragmatism wins out and she agrees to the team up. At least they can all agree on one thing. DeVos will not be getting a cut. And don't get me wrong, this game is irredeemable, but I love these 3. This is everything I want from a Necromunda story, just look at them. There's a few missions where they get set up for the final battle with the Grand Dog. Then they go for it. It's a great showdown, and the cutscenes are popping off.
Miserable time! You dare steal from me!
It's a shame that so much of this gets undone by the Grand Dog being being a really easy fight. The dog soldiers run around and don't know what to actually do. The game was much harder earlier on, actually. Necromunda story missions inherited the Mordheim problem of a massively expanding grocery list of map objectives. But this time you're also on a timer for a lot of these missions. There were a lot of times when I'd have to restart levels because there were objectives I wasn't told about until the very last turn. It sucked, but it did keep the game challenging. Straight up slogs with the AI, on the other hand, are just so easy that you start to feel like the game doesn't have like an actual game for you to play. Anyway, the Grand Dog's down, so let's get to carving up this Archaeotech and giving every gang a cut.
Now, we just split the Archaeotech and go home. Yeah.
Yeah.
Come on, you didn't really think they were going to split it, did you? The closing credits is intercut with a montage of these 3 beating the ever-loving snot out of each other over the Archaeotech. It's literally the perfect ending. I was laughing my ass off the entire time. And DeVos says in voiceover that this was all part of the plan. Brother, don't lie. How are you going to get the Archaeotech after this from the winning gang? You're gonna send another? You're gonna send a 4th gang that will absolutely cut you out of the deal as well? This is why DeVos is my favorite character. If he truly did have a plan, then that plan is utterly stupid and humiliating. It's genius. I just need to get ignored by the Rowdy Boys, get stolen from by the Black Ash, shoved into a locker by the Bane Cats. It's all part of the plan. Are you crying? It's part of the plan! The story mode is what most new players of the series will engage with. It's a good story, but the gameplay is just not good enough to get people to stick around. That's both because it locks all the rewarding gameplay in the other game mode, and also because the actual AI is just impossibly frustrating to watch. I saw a review kicking around for the game that was titled something like, "I wish Necromunda was as cool as it looks," and that reviewer was spitting. The presentation for this game was excellent, and the story sells you on the world completely. But the game itself is actively infuriating and disrespectful of your time. The only redeeming thing about the gameplay is that your controls are good. Your gang itself is fun to play as. And even then, we were missing all of the gang customization and progression, since that stuff is locked in the other game mode. Let's quickly cover that other game mode while we're here, though I think we've already said most of what needs to be said about this game. You get to build your own custom gang, and you have the choice of all of the clan houses, save House Delac, though Clan Cawdor and Van Sar are both paid DLC content. You'll take part in missions to gather loot that can be used to improve your gang. Lots of changes have been made from the old campaign. Improvements, really. You don't just do isolated missions now, you do operations, which are a series of connected missions while you and a number of other local gangs compete to grab all the scrap in this little region of the Hive. It makes the generic missions feel much more interconnected, and you now have a better ability to visualize your rivals in the region, since you know who they are and what they're up to. They feel like your competitors now, instead of just some generic enemies you're fighting on the map. And while these improvements are all good, there's no actual story incentive or anything to this anymore. So the game is just hoping that you got that dog in you to play in endless mode. But in my opinion, it's hard to actually gather that motivation. You want to get stronger? For what? To beat the AI? You don't need to be stronger to beat them. They don't even know what game they're playing. The only possible answer is that you're getting stronger to be better at the multiplayer. And frankly, good luck finding games. We're left with a very polished campaign mode with no reason whatsoever to play it. There's no story and no challenge to overcome. And what sucks is that the game mode has a lot to love in it. The customization is great. Look at my gang, I'm really proud of them, dressed in the closest approximation to British racing green I could find. I liked building them, the progression system is streamlined and satisfying. I built up my sniper to have this like cascading damage combo triggered by her reloading. It was great. Everything's awesome on your end. I want to play my gang more. The game just doesn't give you anything to like play against, or any story to motivate you to just accept that you're just farming the AI. I want to play as my gang more, but the idea of having to play them in this game against this AI is actively repulsive to me. And that makes me sad. I'm sad now. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If so, I'll let you know that I've got a big, beefy Rogue Trader video coming out in the new year, so I hope to see you there. Follow me on Blue Sky to keep in touch till then. Link in the description. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.